Hey everyone, and welcome to the lecture 2.3 on privacy and security in online social media. In the previous lectures, we mainly talked about data collection and the tools we use for data collection, along with how we can use those tools and the data we obtain to check for things such as credibility. Now we'll be talking about arguably one of the most important parts of data collection, which is the ethics of data collection. So, data collection, as we know, is a very powerful tool in understanding social media. Through data collection, we can understand the topology, the network, and data flow of these platforms, right? But we need to know that there are a few principles that we must follow when obtaining data. Any form of mishandling of the data can lead to privacy breaches, loss of trust, legal consequences, and many other serious problems. So, before we actually go into these principles, let's first discuss a few real world scenarios of this mishandling of data. So, one of the most well known examples is the Cambridge Analytica case caused by Facebook in 2018. So, Cambridge Analytica is a political consulting firm located in the United Kingdom. And what Cambridge Analytica did is that they obtained the information and data of over 50 million Facebook profiles uh, without their consent. Right, so and how they were able to do this is that back then Facebook tended to have a very lenient data collection policy. Basically, they would not concern themselves with data collection that happened through some third party application. So that means that Cambridge Analytica was able to obtain the information of not only users, but also their close relationships, such as friends and family, who weren't even associated with the app or didn't have a Facebook account. Right? So the data collected by Cambridge Analytica was used mainly in personal or to personalize campaign tactics and sway voters' decisions to a particular candidate. Two notable cases of this was the 2016 U.S. elections, where Donald Trump's campaign used the data collected by Cambridge Analytica to create advertisement or political advertisement to sway votes in his favor. Likewise, we had the Brexit referendum, which is the British Parliament's election, also happening in 2016, where political parties would also use the data obtained by Cambridge Analytica from Facebook, from the Facebook platform, to sway votes in their favor. So here we can see breaches of two things: consent and transparency. Both which we'll discuss more in detail when we talk about the policies or the practices of ethical data collection. So the next case, also from 2018, is when a fitness tracking app called Strava published a global heat map that contained a billion exercise records from millions of users across the globe. So when analyzing this heat map, it was shown that um, numerous U.S. Military bases or secret military bases were exposed through the app due to the fact that they were tracking jogging and exercise routes of U.S. soldiers located in various secret bases across various countries. For example, in Afghanistan uh, and Syria, as well as U.S. bases in even Area 51. So here we can see a clear example of breaches of confidentiality uh, through this data breach. So even though that these cases are quite old, we know that data breaches happen quite often, and it's important to follow proper ethics in order to prevent cases as big as these in the future. So uh, we need to ensure that when we do collect data, we have to do it ethically so that we don't have, you know, stuff like the Cambridge Analytica case happening all over again. So let's go over the principles of ethical collection or ethical data collection. So we have 6 basic rules that you should follow when you're collecting data on social media. They are transparency, consent, data minimization, fairness, privacy and confidentiality, and accountability. So let's go over each one one by one. So starting with transparency, transparency is disclosing what data will be collected and how it's used. So the biggest way you can show transparency is by having something called a privacy policy. So privacy policy is essentially a documentation that states that basically the rights of a user and the privacy that a user has when accessing your application, as well as the information that you collect and how you're going to use that information. It basically gives more control to the user and kind of explains the user how they're going to use your private information or their private information. So we can show transparency by providing clear and concise privacy policies, meaning they should be in proper grammar, uh, a multiple languages if you can, but essentially proper English as well. They should be to the point, uh, and very straightforward. Right. So second thing is that privacy policy should be easy to access and be read. For example, here we have Instagram's privacy policy, which you can find at this website here, and also you can find through the Instagram app as well. As you can see, they have a nice video explaining it, as well as clear, understandable text on what kind of information that they collect, as well as how they might use it as well. This certain section of the privacy policy dictates the type of information they collect. If you go to this link right here, you can read about how they use that information and even more into the privacy policy. So that's there, as well as you need to notify users when privacy policies changes. You might know that every once in a while, usually once a year, you might receive some sort of email or notification through any app, examples, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat as well, that their data policies, stuff like their terms and conditions have changed, and mainly the privacy policies have changed. So one thing you can do is that anytime your privacy policy changes, make sure you inform users via some email or the like a notification inbuilt into your social media app so that users are aware that the privacy policy has changed and that they can review it for their own benefit. Right, so the next principle is consent. So consent is ensuring users understand and agree to data collection. So what happens here is that we should give users the ability to opt in or opt out of their data being collected. For example, again, you can see here on the Instagram app, if you go to Instagram settings, account permissions, and your information and permissions, again, located within the app, you can find these 3 permissions. These are like some very primary or basic permissions where you can agree to your information in Instagram being collected for stuff like your activity of meta technologies, specific ads that you and ad partners, and managing your contents as well. So, according to Instagram's privacy policy, they use this mainly for specialized uh, advertisements and as well as your For You page for specific posts catered to your algorithm and stuff like that. So we know that users can opt in and opt out of their data. We have to use granular consent options. So granular consent options means that for each specific part of data collection, we should have an option to opt in and opt out. For example, say I have 2 things, my location and then maybe my username. So I can choose to opt out of my location being collected, but then I can choose to opt in for my username being collected. Right? So something similar, as you can see here, you can choose your activity off meta technologies. You can opt in or opt out. Add partners, you can go in or out. And managing contacts, you can agree or disagree. So that it's very granular, meaning for each specific thing, you have a choice basically to whether you want that information or that specific information to be collected or not. Okay, and the last part is to allow users to opt out at any time easily, meaning that at any point, even if a user initially opts in, they can choose to opt out very easily by the push of a button. It shouldn't be uh, guardrailed by any sort of difficulty. Right, so that is for consent. The next part is data minimization. So data minimization is collecting only the minimum data required for the intended purpose. Example of this is not collecting sensitive information. So you shouldn't collect stuff like medical records, passwords, bank account details, basically PII or personal identity information. In other words, information that can be traced back to you or identify a person. That's what we consider PII. So we don't want to collect that kind of information. One other point is to remove any unnecessary data that is collected. So if any data that is not needed for at any reason whatsoever, best to delete it or remove it, and anonymize data as much as possible. So this kind of goes back to this, where we don't want to identify a person based on their data. Again, going to Instagram's privacy policy here, we can see a specific paragraph given right here that says to use less information that's connected to individual users. In some cases, we de-identify or aggregate information or anonymize it so that it no longer identifies you. We use this information the same way we use your information as described in this section. Basically, what Instagram does is that any information it collects through their apps, they anonymize it so it cannot be traced back to a specific individual. And that's what we want to do as well. We don't want someone to be able to figure out the identity of someone based on the information that has been collected. So the next thing is fairness. So fairness means that we have to ensure unbiased collection of data and avoid discrimination. So this is very important when we especially talk about such like AI models, when we need to train models. So we should first test data sets and algorithms for bias. We don't want certain algorithms to cater towards certain marginalized groups. This could be race, gender, religion, etc. We don't want certain algorithms to show, like, for example, a different post to different people based on attributes such as these, or protected attributes such as these, right? Next thing is that we should ensure data does not reinforce social inequalities. It includes stuff like racism and discrimination. We don't want the data that we collect to be representative of uh, discrimination against any form of marginalized groups. And last is to include a diverse perspective when collecting data. This means we want an unbiased, very diverse data set or collection of data. So again, we go to the privacy policy. They have a specific, we're specifically talking about Meta's generative AI that you can find in Instagram and most modern Meta apps. So here we can see is one of their pillars is fairness and inclusion, meaning that they try to train their model to be unbiased, their algorithm to be unbiased, and to be as fair as possible. So second to last is privacy and confidentiality. This means that we have to protect identifiable and sensitive data. We were talking about PII before and all the very private information and data minimization. So all the data that we do collect, we have to make sure that it's secure and not prone to data breaches. So a few ways we can do that. First is to secure data through some form of encryption technique. Basically, you have to secure it into a certain database that you know won't be breached or is very unlikely to be breached. Next is to restrict data access to only unauthorized personnel, meaning you shouldn't let access be or data be open source. We don't want that. It should be closed off. Essentially, only people who necessary or need it should be able to access it. Finally, we have uh, ensuring proper procedures when sharing data to third parties. If by any chance it is absolutely necessary for you to give information to a third party app, most of the time this includes some form of partners, vendors, even authorities, or for some legal reason you have to give it. You should ensure that there is a proper procedure in place so that that data is not being extorted in any way by those third party people, and that no one besides you and that specific third party have access to that data. So again, if we take the privacy policy of Instagram, we can see on the right hand side uh, how a section on how we share information with third parties. So Instagram states that they don't sell any information to anyone, and they never will, but sometimes they do require to give information to third parties and that they follow rules about it. So they have sections. The first section I have here is partners. If you go into this site here and you scroll down, you can find about vendors, authorities, lawyers, and stuff like that, like how they share information. But basically, these are dictate what information they'll be given to these people and how they can ensure that proper procedures are in place when they are giving this information. The last principle is accountability. So, in the case that some issue or problem that happens, and you've ended up actually mishandling the data, or unethical data collection has happened, it is important that you take responsibility for any problems that is related to this data collection. So, one of the most important things that need to be done is to own up to mistakes publicly and properly. So, even if in the case of Cambridge Analytica, where the data collection was happening through Cambridge Analytica, and legally speaking, Facebook did not actually get involved for it, it was important for the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, to actually take accountability to their data collection policy and the faults in that data collection, and take ownership of it. So as we can see here in March of 2018, when this case came to light, Mark Zuckerberg did post a post on Facebook, which you can find, read about it here. This is only a small section of the post. The post is very large, talking about uh, the case and basically owning up or taking accountability for it. The second thing we can point out is we have to establish a clear solution or plan. Okay, so data breach has happened, mishandling, unethical data collection has happened. Okay, so what you need to explain, or is your responsibility to explain to the users what they can do to protect their information further, and what you will do as the person who caused the unethical data collection to basically secure the data in the future, what you will do currently now to ensure that their data is being protected. Again, through this post, Mark Zuckerberg does explain about the steps that they will be taking for it, if you read about it more. And then finally is periodically review whether your practices are ethical or not. So it's important to not wait for a data breach or for some problem to occur. It's important, maybe say once every, you can say, few months. Best practices around maybe every 6 months or so, depending on the amount of data that you have, to periodically review. Okay, is the data that I've collected, did I collect it ethically? Did I collect only the minimum amount I needed? Am I breaking any laws, or will this data collection cause any issues to the users, and such and so forth. So that is all for the principles of uh, data collection. Going further, we should note that countries have various laws about the rights to one's own digital data. In India, we have what is considered the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023, which states that an act to provide the processing of digital personal data in a manner that recognizes both the rights of the individual to protect their personal data and the need to process of such personal data for lawful purposes and for matters connected therewithin and or incidental thereto. So basically, this law, if you can read about this further. This law basically describes that individual users have the right to their own personal data and how companies, social media platforms, what they can do to make sure that they follow the laws of collecting personal data while also ethically collecting the data for their own uh, lawful purposes. Right? So this is something you can read about more in detail if you wish. So it's important to keep all these in mind, both the principles and even the laws of your country, when collecting and analyzing data. So that's it for this lecture. If you do have any questions, please raise them in the discussion forum. And thank you so much for watching.